Hello and welcome to the walkthrough for the Year 9 Immune System Study Table. There's a link below in the description if you want to download what I'm talking about. Okay, there are 3 lines of defense for the immune system, the first, second and third line. The first and second lines are non-specific, which means it doesn't care who you are. If you don't belong in the body, it's going to attack you. So the first line of defense prevents entry, and we have the skin, which is a physical barrier, but easily bypassed if you get a cut. Then we've got gut flora, which is the good bacteria living inside your large intestine that can outcompete the bad bacteria. We've got the urinary tract, in particular the urethra, that flushes out any microbes, but it also has macrophages in it, which we'll go through a little bit later on. Then we have saliva and tears that both flush out the bacteria and the viruses, but they also have lysozymes in them, and a lysozyme is a type of enzyme that breaks down bacterial cell walls and kills them. Then we've got earwax. The proper name for earwax is cerumen, and it is sticky and any pathogen gets stuck in it rather than entering through the eardrum. Then we've got mucus that traps bacteria and viruses, and the ciliated epithelium sweeps the mucus along towards the stomach and drops it into that pit of hell. And the stomach, as I've just said, is a pit of hell because it has acid in it with a pH of 1.5, which kills almost any bacteria or virus. Then we get onto the second line, and the major cell type for the second line of defense is the macrophage. And there's a picture of the macrophage in the middle there. The macrophage is non-specific, which means if you don't belong in the body, it will attack you. And the way that it decides is it looks for the antigens. An antigen is a molecule that initiates an immune response. So all of your cells have on them the self-antigen, which tells the immune system that they belong. But any invader, like a bacteria or a virus, has a non-self antigen, which means the macrophage will attack it. The macrophage attacks foreign antigens using a process called phagocytosis. Phagocytosis means the eating of cells. And the picture in the middle here shows you the process of phagocytosis. The macrophage finds a bacterium, then opens up and swallows the bacterium and destroys it. That's called phagocytosis. That's why macrophages are also called phagocytes, because they are cells that eat other cells. And as I said before, it's non-specific. So any cell type, any pathogen that doesn't have the self-antigen will be eaten by the macrophage. It doesn't care who it is. Opposite of that, we have the word fever. And I've written fever there because when a person has fever, their internal thermostat is reset to a higher temperature. And that resetting to the higher temperature actually increases the activity of their macrophages, and they become even more active in their hunt for non-self antigens. Right, so when a macrophage engulfs a foreign antigen, it shows the third line of defense what it has caught, what it has eaten. It shows the third line of defense the non-self antigen that it has found. It becomes a cell type called an antigen presentation cell, in that it shows the third line of defense the non-self antigen that is found and presents it, and it initiates both humoral and cell-mediated immunity. Both humoral and cell-mediated immunity are said to be specific because they target specific pathogens. It's also specific because both the humoral and the cell-mediated immunity have a memory, and we'll talk about that right now. So when the macrophage shows the humoral immunity cells, the B cells, the foreign antigen that it has found, that B cell will divide into 2 different types of cells. The first one is called a B plasma cell. A B plasma cell makes antibodies, but it takes about 3 to 5 days for those antibodies to start to be made. The antibodies are specific to the foreign antigen, and the antibodies lock onto the foreign antigen, and that tells the macrophage to eat them. But it also divides into B memory cells. And it takes 28 days to make these B memory cells. And these B memory cells are specific to the foreign antigen that initiated their manufacture. And when the memory cell comes in contact with the same antigen, it will rapidly swing into action. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so the macrophage in the same way shows the cell-mediated immunity cells, the T cells, the foreign antigen that it has found. And then the T cell splits into 2 different types of cell. It splits into a cytotoxic T cell and into a T memory cell. Now, the cytotoxic T cells, they look for infected cells. And when it comes across an infected cell, it spews cytotoxic chemicals onto the surface, killing the cell and thereby killing the pathogen as well. But as I said before, it also makes T memory cells that take 28 days to make. Now we're going to look at the graph below. On the y-axis is antibody concentration, and on the x-axis is time. So the word first exposure means you actually get a real illness. When you get a real illness like the flu, it takes 3 to 5 days for you to start to make antibodies. But once you start making antibodies, the antibodies neutralize the foreign antigen, and that calls over the macrophages to undergo phagocytosis and eat up the foreign antigen, thus killing it. Okay, the word vaccination is for a vaccine. It gives you the same sort of response as when you actually get sick, except a vaccination tricks the immune system to making antibodies and memory cells rather than you actually getting sick. Okay, now we go over to the second exposure. So whether you've had a proper illness or you've been vaccinated, after 28 days you've got memory cells. And the memory cells lie inside your immune system waiting to be exposed to the same pathogen for a second time. Now, whereas before it took 3 to 5 days to make antibodies, it now only takes 1 day. And whereas before it gave you a small antibody response, it now gives you a huge antibody response. So you can see there with the second exposure, we get a rapid and prolific antibody response that's going to completely annihilate the specific pathogen that it encountered before, and you'll never know you were sick a second time. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe and maybe even share it with your friends so they can see what they're missing out on. I'll catch you later and goodbye.